Nice to see you, Commissioner. I know we've had some conversations, and I very much appreciate your open door or your open Zoom, whichever way you want to look at it. Let me start by saying that, people with disabilities only want what everybody else wants, to be able to live a good quality life. And OPWDD was set up to support people with disabilities in that endeavor. There's been a big disappointment over the years because OPWDD, rather than being an advocate, has become an apologist. And I'm hopeful that we're going to see you as an advocate publicly for people with disabilities to the governor and to the rest of the world. I am pleased with the way you've acted so far. I just hope that you're going to be able to continue that and that you speak out as an advocate for people with disabilities. Now, the senator covered most of the things that I wanted to talk about. Let me just raise some of the issues again and maybe a different way. We're talking about money for one-time bonuses. If we were to raise the salaries of the entire industry that is under OPWDD, do we have any idea what that would cost? I mean, there are people saying that we need to increase salaries 150% permanently so that we can go from $15 an hour to $22 an hour in order to compete with Amazon and McDonald's and all of those other places. Do we have any estimate what the real cost of that would be?
Well, we'd have to get back to you. I certainly don't have it off the top of my head. And I think, as you know, right, every provider, based on sort of where they are located, what their rate is, et cetera, have sort of a different starting salary for their staff. And then, as you talked about, right, there are levels of compression, there are clinical titles, and the rate of pay based by provider, based on where they're located, based on the home that they're in, all might be slightly different. So,
well, that's valid. I would just like to, I'm sorry, I'm going to move quickly because otherwise, but I want to urge you to please do that study because I think it's important that we understand what our target is. At the same time, I'd also like to ask you to include the cost to the providers. Like I've heard from them that they're saying their health insurance costs for their employees have gone up 40%. And they have other insurance costs and other things like that have gone up. So when you do that study, if you could please include those types of costs so we have somewhere to start. The second thing is we've talked about a 507 plan, which I guess is a 5-year plan that is supposed to be due every 5 years or something like that. Do we have any idea where that is at this point and when we can expect that to come out? The last commissioner promised that it would be out, 2 years ago, and we still haven't seen it. Do you have any idea when we'll get to see that?
Sure. Yeah. And we're, the 507 plan is something that we're actually very excited about within OPWDD. Over the summer, we embarked on, significant stakeholder engagement related to that and a draft. There is a draft in process now. As you know, right at the end of the summer, new governor, new deputy secretary, new commissioner. So wanted to make sure that, I had the opportunity to hit the ground running, talking to folks, understanding people's input, and make sure that I was taking a fresh look at the 507 before we finalize the draft. We expect to have a draft out by mid-April, and then a final version of that. Once the draft goes out, it will be open for public comment. Obviously, we'll have, conversations with you, Senator Mannion, the DDAC, and then we'll have finalized a final version of the 507 plan by November.
Commissioner, you said that you're talking to the stakeholders, the people who are out there. I'd like to urge you to set up more formal processes where parents and guardians and those in the field can have more input. I know there are some processes already. They don't seem to really be having the input that they should. I know you're putting out an RFP to look at the whole system, et cetera. I would really like to see us use that money instead of for an RFP for housing and other services, and that we instead do it in-house and hear from the stakeholders. I had a Zoom meeting on Saturday. We had, 60 people show up. We took selected testimony, a few minutes from each, and I've got a list of things that we could use to review and revise the way OPWDD functions. So I would urge that you do that kind of a thing, hold some public forums, bring in different groups of people, and maybe save the money that an RFP would cost. The other thing is, when we're talking about we've heard, I don't know where to start here. The senator did a lot of what we need to do. What efforts are being made to fill those 4,000 beds that you spoke about? I don't have a sense that those beds are empty because of a lack of personnel, but just because of a lack of money from OPWDD to the voluntary agencies to fill those beds. Is there any effort to look at that and to try to get that money out the door to them?
Sure. I think there's a lot of efforts going on, and certainly, staffing is definitely a significant challenge, and individuals, needing residential opportunities, like I said, need to have the staff there to support them. We have several things in the proposed budget. Certainly the COLA will increase, right, by 5.4% the rates to all of our providers, which will help with additional funds. The $3,000 bonus, what we're doing for ARPA, will all work towards recruitment and retention. The other thing that we're doing that you and I have talked about is we are revising the way that we make rates for our providers. Currently, our rates are based on 2 years old cost information, and it's not based on the needs of the individual that will be served in that bed. So we are instead working with the Department of Health and the state's actuary to come up with a new rate making methodology that recognizes acuity and will help pay a provider based on the needs of the individual, and will help make sure that the resources that the individual needs to live in a residence are met. So
Commissioner, on that point, if I can, I have heard from some agencies that they are willing to take some of the most severe cases if OPWDD would work with them to develop the programs. I know OPWDD is trying very hard to bring people back from out of state, but thus far we do not have the capability of dealing with those people because that's why they're out of state. Can we get a commitment that you will sit down with the agencies and develop a plan to replace the services that are out of state with equivalent services, rather than just burdening the agencies and say, you've got to take these people, figure out a way to do it? I think some agencies are willing to work and to put in the monies necessary and the effort money necessary, but they need a specific commitment from OPWDD that OPWDD will work with them to develop these programs.
If there are providers who are willing to develop programs for some of the more complex and hard to serve individuals in our system, I'd be happy to meet with them and have my team present so that we can discuss what those ideas are and how OPWDD might support them. Definitely.
Commissioner, I'd also like to have you set up another group to meet with those who distribute the services, like the brokers and the fiscal intermediaries and people like that, because I'm hearing that on a day-to-day basis, there's a problem. There's a disparity of distribution of workforce in the different regions, and that it takes months to make a simple change in a self-direction budget when the money's in the budget and they just want to move it from one place to another, and that it takes forever to do all kinds of things, that people have to be fingerprinted twice if they work for two different agencies, and there's delays, all kinds of small problems like that I think could be taken care of if you were to send one of your deputies to meet with the different agencies, make a list of these and try to deal with these day-to-day problems. I think that would save money for your agency. It would save time out on the outside for those who are doing the day-to-day work, and provide a lot better service for those people. And I think this is budget related, because those monies can then be taken and put back into the system. So again, I'd like to ask for a commitment that you will designate somebody to deal with representatives from the self-direction field all over the state. They all have problems, and many of them are, some of them are different than others.
Yeah, absolutely. We are finalizing right now. I know that, you thought that maybe some of the funds could be better used in RFPs, but, we feel very strongly that, we have an opportunity with some of the enhanced federal dollars to take a look at some of our programs, self-direction being one of them. And we are going to be issuing an RFP soon, an RFA, to bring on a consultant to take a deep dive and look very thoroughly at our self-direction program. Certainly talking with FIs, with brokers, with family
Right.
members, and with self-advocates.
But Commissioner, we can't wait a full year or two for that report to come back. It's got to be a very short time frame. And I will tell you, these are professionals who know exactly what needs to be done. Like one of the things that I just want to bring, a very small problem, but for some people it's a big problem. The inflation rate is now 7% a month, and there's no increase in the housing allocations. And whether under self-direction, and the agencies themselves also are having a problem. They're struggling. Is there any way we can come up with some emergency monies to deal with the crunch? I mean, people get, what is it, $3,000 a year to deal with telephone and utilities and heat and whatever. And that's gone now. I mean, with 7%, they were struggling before. There's no way they're going to be able to stay in their apartments. Can we get some kind of emergency funding for that in this budget?
Well, certainly the governor's proposed budget does include the increase of the housing subsidy, if that's what you're referring to. And
yeah, but that's just needed for the day-to-day. We needed an increase in housing subsidy anyway. Now what we're seeing all of a sudden is a zero inflation has gone to 7% overnight. And so that's another crunch in addition to the additional money. So I would ask you to take a look at that and see if we can get some emergency supplement, even a short term, as long as the inflation is now whatever, this high rate.